come and say, talk about culture vultures. People keep that under the hat because the ones that run everything are white people. I had a situation with Eminem, and it was a battle, but a lot of people don't understand the battle wasn't with me. It wasn't about rapping, because Eminem, what people don't understand is I respect his talents. He can rap his ass off, so it never was a situation with that. I just felt like, I got onto hip hop when I was 11 years old in my grandfather's basement. And my uncle, my grandfather's son, he was in the South Bronx. I'd be shipped up there for the summers. And I learned this thing called hip hop that really changed my life, changed a lot of people's lives. I felt like in the 80s where crack kind of ravaged our streets, that, God gave us hip hop because this was something that a guy could come straight out of jail and whereas that he wouldn't get a job, he can get a job in hip hop. I felt like this was the first situation where white people were buying into black culture. And I felt like the Eminem situation was the powers that be in the record industry was really trying to create a rapper so whereas that the white people can have somebody of their own. And I thought that was dangerous. I felt like that as long as hip hop, black and Latino and white people were buying into it, Little Johnny and Susie are having, and no disrespect, but they have black posters all over their walls. That's a great thing for us. That's a great thing for us.
Keeping authentic.
Well, where is that? It's breaking racial barriers, that kids can be like, man, mom, dad, this guy, man, I love his music. And, that's a great thing. I felt like when the Eminem situation came in, that would kind of take the balance off, that the white guys wouldn't have to really deal with us anymore if they had their own. Because, let's face it, and we could even see with the Trump presidency that the country is divided as far as black and white. And there are states that white folks just don't mess with black people because there's not too many black people around in these states anyways. When you look at Republican and Democrat, and you look at the red states and blue states, when we grow up in the cities, we kind of take for granted, look, these white people are around us, but they're cities of white people that never see black people ever, ever, ever. And they're just not with our culture. So when Eminem came in and they built him up and they put a lot of money into him just assimilating with black culture, put him in Detroit, which was one of the blackest cities, especially of our time. And I just felt like, man, that they're spending a lot of money to kind of build him up. So what's going to happen is that these white people are going to just buy into him. And years later, when we're all gone, they'll say, man, they'll look back at this time of hip hop, just like we look back at King Tut, because there was a lot of kings back then, but we kind of look at the King Tut times with the gold and everything, and we're kind of amazed by that time. That's going to happen hundreds, 200-300 years from now, and they're going to look back at this time of hip hop and us with jewelry and young black men who's made a lot of money, and they're going to say, well, wow, this hip hop thing was pretty huge. And then they're going to say, well, who sold the most? And then his picture will put up. And then what that'll do is create, well, damn, he must have been the king of hip hop. He must have been the best. And that's going to alter history. And that's what I was kind of fighting against. At that time when I was with The Source, I really didn't have to answer to nobody. Like, I was at the top of the food chain and we was making a lot of money, and I didn't have to be politically correct. I was a kid from Boston that at that point, I was a wild boy, and I just didn't have to answer to no one or somebody tell me, yo, you can't say that, chill, you can't, because I was I'm at the top of the food chain. Like, I don't have anybody, even people at Def Jam had to answer to somebody. Even people at these radio stations had to answer to somebody. I didn't have to answer to nobody. And we was a pretty big entity in hip hop at that time. And, I'm fighting for the culture, but I look back, there was nobody behind me, and that's what I knew. Like, whoa, Like, I think, I mean, you took it too far, and a lot of advertisement got pulled. A lot of people turned their backs on us. And with owing the bank at that time, I ended up getting indicted by the feds. I mean, everything started happening at one time, and then we ended up losing the source. And when I look back now to what I was trying to do, and I look back at it, everything I said was gonna happen, happened. The good thing about it was the South, and like what Ronnie said, the gift of the internet to make it independent where you don't need these record companies. You could actually just put your stuff on the internet and get streams, and you don't have to deal with anybody. That kind of saved us because, the South had a bop that the white folks couldn't get. And please, I don't want anybody, I think the biggest misconception of me is that I'm anti-white, and I'm not that. I'm just not that. I believe hip hop brought all cultures together, and that's what I was for. It's just that Black people have been getting the short end of the stick from day one, and hip hop was ours, man. And it's not necessarily ours anymore. That doesn't mean it can get back to ours, but that to me is important, that something that we discovered brought all cultures to be like, yo, Black people are good, man. The way they dress, their music, their slang, man, we want to be like them. That's a great thing.
I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm so glad. This is my first time ever hearing you say this, and I think you've been misunderstood. I believe in the fields of hip hop and publishing and our image and culture, you were ahead of your time, and you were back then what Kaepernick is today, when he put everything on the line on principle and looked behind him and said, where y'all at?
I mean,
it's very similar.
Like
it's very
rock
similar.
And roll, though.
It's very similar, though, what you did, and the fact that I do remember that you were on an island by yourself, and then you're up against this superstar white rapper, and it looked like they're gonna take sides, right? And I feel like you were doing it for the purity of the business, and you got shitted on for it.
I appreciate that, Claude.
You did, and it's all connected. The dots are being connected right now. You got shitted on it for it, and now, if you did it now, they'd all be behind you probably. But I think you were way ahead of your time in what you were saying, and people weren't hearing what you were saying. What you were saying is, it's not I'm anti-white rapper, but to have someone else come and take all the credit for what the Black people did and all the stuff that was built on our backs is not right.
It's also, and to your point, I mean, the truth don't need a cosigner. So it's not like it has to be over-explained, but eventually the truth comes to light. And I say that just because the source is what it is. You can't mention hip-hop and not acknowledge the Source magazine. It would be egregious to do some shit like that.
But
You can't talk about it.
It sucks he doesn't get the credit.
The culture club and
Sometimes
not say,
you like Tesla,
especially of
okay?
hip hop, and not say the Source.